If someone had told me when I was 12 years old that my parents would one day show up at my office begging for money after abandoning me for not being the boy they desperately wanted, I would have believed it. Even as a child, I knew I was nothing more than a disappointment to them. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old. What I'm about to tell you isn't a heartwarming story about overcoming adversity. It's about abandonment, gender disappointment, and the kind of cruelty that comes from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. My biological father's name is David. My mother is Linda. They gave me away when I was 12 years old, not because they couldn't afford to raise me, but because I had the audacity to be born female when they desperately wanted a son to carry on the family name. I still remember the last conversation I overheard in that house in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. I was hiding behind the couch in our living room, clutching my worn-out journal where I wrote stories about princesses who saved themselves. My parents were arguing in the kitchen, their voices carrying through the thin walls of our ranch-style home. "We can't keep pretending this is working, Linda," my father said, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "She's not what we planned for. We've tried for 12 years to make this work, but every time I look at her, I'm reminded of what we'll never have." "The adoption agency said the couple in Denver is perfect," my mother replied. "They specifically want an older girl. Sarah will have opportunities there that we can't give her." But I knew the truth. They couldn't give me opportunities because they didn't want to. Every school play I was in, every A+ I brought home, every attempt I made to make them proud, it all fell flat because I wasn't the son they had dreamed of. My younger brother Jake was only 6 at the time, but he was already their golden child. Everything he did was celebrated, from his first steps to his terrible finger paintings that got framed and hung on the refrigerator. My artwork was thrown away without a second glance. My achievements were met with distracted nods and comments like, "That's nice, honey. Now go help with the dishes." The morning they told me I was being sent away, I was getting ready for school like any other day. I had just turned 12 the week before, a birthday that was barely acknowledged with a store-bought cake and a generic card. I was brushing my teeth when Linda appeared in the bathroom doorway. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Come to the living room when you're done." I found them sitting stiffly on the couch, David with his hands clasped tightly together, Linda twisting her wedding ring nervously. There was a manila folder on the coffee table between us. "Sweetheart," Linda began, and I immediately knew something was wrong because she never called me sweetheart. "Your father and I have made a decision that we think will be best for everyone." "You're going to live with a new family," David interrupted, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Hendersons in Denver. They're good people who can give you things we can't." I stood there in my school uniform, a plaid skirt and white blouse that I had ironed myself the night before because Linda was always too busy with Jake, and felt the world tilt sideways. "What do you mean, live with a new family?" "It's called adoption, honey," Linda said, finally looking at me. "They're excited to meet you. They have a big house and they really want a daughter." The word daughter hit me like a slap, because that's what I was, their daughter. But apparently that wasn't enough. "What about school? What about my friends?" I asked, my voice getting smaller with each question. "You'll make new friends," David said dismissively. "The Hendersons will take care of all that." That afternoon, instead of going to school, I found myself in the back seat of our sedan, driving toward Denver with a single suitcase containing clothes that barely fit me anymore. Linda had packed it hastily, throwing in random items without much thought. I clutched my journal and a small stuffed elephant named Peanut that I'd had since I was little. The drive took 4 hours. 4 hours of silence, punctuated only by the radio and Jake asking if we were there yet. Nobody talked about what was happening. Nobody asked how I felt. I pressed my face against the window and watched Arizona turn into Colorado, each mile taking me further from the only home I'd ever known. The Hendersons lived in a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood in Denver. Patricia was a librarian with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Robert was a high school English teacher with a gentle manner and shelves full of books. They had been trying to have children for 15 years before deciding to adopt an older child. When we pulled into their driveway, Patricia came out immediately, followed by Robert. They both looked nervous, but genuinely excited. Patricia knelt down to my level and said, "Sarah, we're so happy you're here. We've prepared a room just for you." I looked back at my parents, some small part of me still hoping this was all a mistake, that they would change their minds and take me home. But David was already getting my suitcase out of the trunk, and Linda was checking her watch impatiently. "Be good," Linda said, giving me a quick, awkward hug. "The Hendersons will take good care of you." David handed my suitcase to Robert and shook his hand. "She's a good kid," he said, as if he were dropping off a pet. "Just needs structure." And then they were gone. Just like that. 12 years of my life reduced to a handshake and a manila folder full of legal documents. That first night in Denver, I lay awake in a bed with sheets that smelled like lavender fabric softener, staring at walls painted a soft yellow colour. Patricia had shown me around the house, pointing out where everything was. My bathroom, the kitchen, the family room where they watched movies together. She told me I could decorate my room however I wanted, that this was my home now. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a museum exhibit titled "What Sarah's Life Could Have Been." The next morning, Robert made pancakes from scratch while Patricia packed me a lunch for my new school. They asked about my favourite foods, what subjects I liked best, if I wanted to join any clubs or sports teams. It was overwhelming, all this attention, all these questions about my preferences and opinions. I wasn't used to adults caring what I thought about anything. At Roosevelt Middle School, I was introduced to my 7th grade class as a new student from Arizona. The teacher, Mrs. Martinez, asked me to tell everyone a little about myself. I stood at the front of the room, looking at faces that were curious but not unkind, and realised I didn't know what to say. What was there to tell? That my parents gave me away because I was born the wrong gender? That I was living with strangers who were trying very hard to make me feel wanted? "I'm Sarah," I said finally. I like to write stories. It was the first true thing I'd said about myself in months. The Hendersons, Patricia and Robert, who told me I could call them by their first names or Mom and Dad, whatever felt comfortable, were patient with my adjustment. They didn't push me to open up or pretend everything was fine. They just provided consistency. Breakfast every morning, help with homework every evening, family movie night every Friday. Slowly, I began to trust that this wasn't temporary, that I wasn't going to wake up one morning and find myself being shipped off somewhere else. Patricia helped me set up a small desk in my room where I could write. Robert introduced me to authors I'd never heard of, Madeleine L'Engle, Ursula K. Le Guin, Octavia Butler, women who wrote the kinds of stories I dreamed of telling. By 8th grade, I was thriving academically. My grades had always been good, but now I had adults who celebrated my achievements. When I won the school writing contest, Patricia and Robert took me out for dinner and made me read my winning story aloud to the waiter. When I made honour roll, Robert put the certificate on the refrigerator right next to the grocery list. High school brought new challenges and opportunities. I joined the newspaper, ran track, and discovered I had a talent for debate. Patricia and Robert came to every meet, every tournament, every school function. They were the parents cheering the loudest in the stands, not because they had to, but because they wanted to be there. During my sophomore year, I had to write an essay about family for English class. I struggled with it for weeks, not knowing what to say or how to define the word family in my own life. Finally, I wrote about how family isn't always biological, how it's the people who show up for you consistently, who believe in your potential even when you don't believe in it yourself. Patricia cried when she read it. "You've given us just as much as we've given you," she told me. Maybe more. When it came time for college applications, Robert helped me research schools with strong journalism programs. Patricia drove me to campus visits across Colorado and neighboring states. They never once mentioned cost or made me feel like a burden. When I got accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, they threw a party and invited all the neighbours. College in Chicago was everything I had dreamed of and more. I studied journalism and creative writing, interned at local newspapers, and discovered a passion for investigative reporting. I called Patricia and Robert every Sunday, sharing stories about my classes, my friends, my plans for the future. They visited twice a year, bringing care packages and embarrassing amounts of pride. After graduation, I got a job at a small newspaper in Denver, wanting to be close to the people who had become my real family. I covered local politics, school board meetings, and community events. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Patricia and Robert helped me find an apartment, and Sunday dinners at their house became a tradition. 3 years later, I was recruited by the Denver Post to cover state politics. It was a significant step up, with better pay and more responsibility. I was finally starting to feel like a real journalist, like someone whose work mattered. That's when everything changed. I was 29 years old, sitting in my cubicle at the Post, working on a story about education funding when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an Arizona number I didn't recognize. Sarah? The voice was hesitant, uncertain. This is Linda. Your mother. My blood went cold. I hadn't spoken to Linda or David in 17 years. After I moved in with the Hendersons, there had been a few awkward phone calls and one uncomfortable visit, but contact had gradually faded until it disappeared entirely. I had built a life without them, and I thought they had done the same without me. Linda, I said carefully, not calling her Mom. That title belonged to Patricia now. This is unexpected. I know it's been a long time, she said, her voice shaking slightly. But Sarah, we need your help. Something terrible has happened. My first instinct was to hang up. Whatever crisis they were facing, it wasn't my responsibility. They had made it clear 17 years ago that I wasn't part of their family, but something in her voice, desperation maybe, or genuine fear, made me stay on the line. What's wrong? I asked. It's Jake, she said, and my heart clenched despite everything. He's in the hospital. There was an accident and he needs surgery, very expensive surgery. Our insurance won't cover all of it and we don't have the money. Jake, my little brother who had been 6 years old when I left, who was now 23 and a stranger to me. Despite everything that had happened between me and my biological parents, I felt a pang of worry for him. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, but I'm not sure why you're calling me. We heard about your job, about how well you're doing, Linda continued. David found an article you wrote online. We're so proud of you, Sarah. We always knew you were special. The lie came so easily, so naturally, that I almost laughed. They had never been proud of me. They had never thought I was special. But now that they needed something, suddenly I was their accomplished daughter. What exactly are you asking me for? I said. Just a loan, Linda said quickly. $20,000 for Jake's surgery. We'll pay you back, I promise. It's just that we don't have anyone else to turn to. $25,000. More money than they had ever spent on me in 12 years of raising me. More than they had contributed to my education, my wedding fund, my future. And they wanted it for Jake, the golden child who had replaced me so easily. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course, Linda said. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, Jake's surgery is scheduled for next week. We don't have much time. After I hung up, I sat in my cubicle staring at my computer screen, unable to focus on the words in front of me. Colleagues walked by discussing stories and deadlines, but all I could think about was that phone call and the flood of memories it had unleashed. That evening, I drove to Patricia and Robert's house for an impromptu visit. I found them in their kitchen, Robert grading papers at the table while Patricia prepared dinner. It was such a familiar, comforting scene that I almost started crying right there. Honey, what's wrong? Patricia asked immediately, setting down her wooden spoon and wrapping me in a hug. I told them about the phone call, about Linda's request, about all the complicated emotions I was feeling. They listened without judgment. They asking clarifying questions but never telling me what to do. What does your gut tell you? Robert asked finally. That this isn't about Jake, I said. This is about them realizing I might be useful to them now that I'm successful. Patricia nodded slowly. Do you want a relationship with Jake, separate from everything else? That was the question that kept me awake that night. Did I want to know my brother? Was it possible to help him without enabling the people who had hurt me? The next day, I called Linda back. "I'll pay for Jake's surgery," I said. "But I have conditions." Anything, she said immediately. "First, the money goes directly to the hospital, not to you or David. Second, I want Jake's contact information so I can establish a relationship with him separate from you. And third, this is not the beginning of me financially supporting your family. This is a one-time thing." Linda agreed to everything, probably because she didn't have a choice. Within 24 hours, I had arranged for the payment to go directly to the hospital in Phoenix. I also got Jake's phone number and sent him a text introducing myself. The response I got back surprised me. "Sarah? Holy shit. I've been wondering about you for years. Can we talk?" Talk? We talked for hours that first night. Jake told me he had always known there was a sister who came before him. But our parents had made it clear that talking about me was off limits. As he got older, he started asking more questions and eventually learned the full truth about why I had been sent away. "I always felt guilty," he admitted, "like I was somehow responsible for what happened to you. I knew they wanted a son so badly, and I was the son they got. But I also knew they had gotten rid of their daughter to make room for me." Jake's surgery went well, and during his recovery, we continued to build a relationship via phone and video calls. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly mature. He also made it clear that he didn't share our parents' values or their treatment of me. "I love them because they're my parents," he told me, "but I don't like them very much as people. What they did to you was unforgivable." 6 months after Jake's surgery, Linda called again. "Sarah, honey, we were wondering if you might want to come visit," she said. "It's been so long and we'd love to see how wonderful you've turned out." The invitation felt hollow, like a performance. But I was curious about Jake, and I thought maybe it was time to face the people who had shaped my life by abandoning it. I flew to Phoenix on a Friday afternoon in November. Jake picked me up from the airport, and I was struck by how much he looked like David. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the same dark hair and strong jaw. But his eyes were kind in a way I didn't remember David's being. The house was exactly the same as I remembered it. The same ranch-style layout, the same beige walls, even the same furniture in the living room. It was like walking into a time capsule of my childhood, if my childhood had been frozen at the moment I left. Linda and David were waiting in the living room, and the awkwardness was immediate and overwhelming. Linda had gained weight and looked older than her 53 years. David's hair had gone completely grey, and he seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than he had when I was 12. "Sarah, you look beautiful," Linda said, standing up to hug me. So professional and successful. The hug felt forced, like we were actors playing roles we didn't understand. David shook my hand formally, as if I were a business acquaintance rather than his daughter. We had dinner at the dining room table, and the conversation was stilted and strange. They asked about my job, my apartment, my life in Denver, but their questions felt scripted, like they were checking boxes on a list of things good parents should ask about. "We always knew you'd do well for yourself," David said as Linda served dessert. "You were always so independent." Independent. That was their way of rewriting history, of making my self-reliance sound like a choice rather than a necessity. After dinner, Jake and I went for a walk around the neighborhood. The Arizona air was cool and dry, and the houses looked exactly the same as they had 20 years ago. "This is weird for you, isn't it?" Jake asked. "Weird," I admitted. "It's like visiting a museum of my childhood trauma." Jake laughed, but not mockingly. "They've been preparing for this visit for weeks. Mom's been cleaning the house obsessively, and Dad keeps practicing what he's going to say to you." "What do they want?" I asked. "I mean, really want?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "I think they want absolution," he said finally. "They want you to tell them that what they did was okay, that it all worked out for the best." That night, I stayed in a hotel rather than in my old room, which Linda had turned into an office years ago. I needed space to process everything. The weird dinner conversation, the unchanged house, the way my parents looked at me like I was a stranger they were trying to impress. The next morning, Jake and I had breakfast together, and he told me more about growing up as the golden child. "It wasn't as great as you might think," he said. "The pressure was incredible. Everything I did had to be perfect because I was their miracle boy. I couldn't just be a regular kid. I had to be worthy of being chosen over you." He paused, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I think they built up this mythology about me in their minds to justify what they did to you. If I was this amazing special child, then getting rid of you to focus on me made sense. But I'm just a regular person, Sarah. I'm not special enough to justify what they did." That afternoon, I sat down with Linda and David for what I knew would be our final conversation as a family unit. "I need to know why," I said without preamble. "Not the sanitized version you've been telling yourselves for 20 years. The real reason you gave me away." Linda and David exchanged glances, and I could see them debating how much truth to tell. "We were young when we had you," Linda started. "We didn't know what we were doing." "You weren't that young," I interrupted. "You were 26 and 28. That's older than I am now." David cleared his throat. "The truth is, Sarah, we had very specific ideas about what our family would look like. We wanted a son to carry on the family name. When you were born, we thought we'd try again, have the boy we wanted, and then our family would be complete." "But you only wanted one child," I said. "We could only afford one child," Linda said. "Not financially, but emotionally. We didn't have the bandwidth for two children, and we had to choose." There it was, the truth I had suspected, but never had confirmed. When it came down to a choice between their daughter and their hypothetical future son, they chose the hypothetical son. "So you threw me away," I said. "We gave you opportunities we couldn't provide," David said defensively. "The Hendersons were better parents to you than we ever could have been." "That doesn't make what you did okay," I said. "You don't get to take credit for the good parents I found after you abandoned me." The conversation went in circles for another hour, with Linda and David alternating between defensiveness and what seemed like genuine remorse. But their remorse felt performative, like they were sorry they had been caught being cruel rather than sorry for the cruelty itself. Finally, I stood up to leave. "I'm glad I came," I said, "because now I know for certain that I made the right choice in building a life without you." Linda started crying. "Sarah, please. We're family. Can't we try to rebuild what we lost?" "We're not family," I said. "We share DNA, but that's all. Family is what the Hendersons gave me. Unconditional love, support, and the belief that I was valuable just as I am. You never gave me any of those things." David stood up, his face red with anger. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, but there was no humour in it. "You mean the 12 years of making me feel unwanted, followed by 17 years of silence? Or do you mean the phone call asking for money when you needed something?" I walked toward the door, Jake following behind me. In the driveway, I turned back to look at the house one more time. Linda was crying in the doorway, and David was standing behind her with his arms crossed. "I wish things had been different," I called out to them. "I wish you had been capable of loving me, but they weren't and you weren't, and it's not my fault." Update 1. It's been 6 months since my visit to Phoenix, and I wanted to update everyone on what's happened since then. Jake and I have maintained our relationship, and it's been one of the best things to come out of this whole situation. He moved to Colorado in January for a job opportunity, and we have dinner together once a week. It's strange having a sibling after all these years, but it's a good strange. Last month, Jake told me that Linda and David have been asking him to convince me to come home and be part of the family again. They seem to think that if they try hard enough, they can undo 20 years of separation and build the relationship they never wanted in the first place. I told them it doesn't work that way, Jake said. You can't abandon someone and then expect them to be grateful when you decide you want them back. But apparently Linda and David didn't get the message, because 2 weeks ago they showed up at my office. I was in a meeting with my editor when my assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Sarah, there are people here to see you. They say they're your parents." My heart sank. I excused myself from the meeting and went to the lobby, where I found Linda and David sitting uncomfortably on the modern furniture, looking completely out of place among the busy journalists and ringing phones. What are you doing here? I asked. We wanted to surprise you, Linda said, standing up with a nervous smile. We thought maybe if we came to see you on your turf, you'd understand how proud we are of what you've accomplished. David remained seated, looking around the newsroom with what seemed like grudging admiration. This is impressive, Sarah. Really impressive. Their presence in my workplace felt make amends, I repeated. You want to make amends? Here's how you do that. You leave me alone. You stop showing up uninvited. You respect the boundaries I've set. That's the only amends I want from you. Several of my colleagues had stopped working to watch the scene unfold. I could feel their eyes on us, and I was mortified that my personal drama was playing out in my professional space. We're not giving up on you, Linda said as I walked them toward the elevator. You're our daughter, whether you like it or not. No, I said firmly. I'm Patricia and Robert Henderson's daughter. You're just the people who gave birth to me and then gave me away. After they left, I went back to my desk and tried to focus on work, but I was shaking with anger and humiliation. My editor, Maria, came over and asked if I was okay. Family drama, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The kind of family drama that shows up at work uninvited? Maria asked knowingly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Listen, Maria said. I don't know your whole story, but I know good people don't usually have to chase down their adult children at their workplaces. If you need time off to deal with this, let me know. That evening, I called Patricia and Robert and told them what had happened. Patricia was furious. How dare they show up at your work, she said. That's harassment, Sarah. Pure and simple. Robert was more measured in his response, but I could hear the anger beneath his calm tone. Do you want us to come up there? We can be there tomorrow. I almost said yes. Despite being 32 years old, part of me still wanted my real parents to come protect me from my biological parents. But I knew this was something I had to handle myself. I love you both, I said instead. Thank you for always being there for me. The next day, I called Jake and told him what had happened. He was mortified. Jesus, Sarah, I'm so sorry, he said. I had no idea they were planning this. If I had known, I would have tried to stop them. It's not your fault, I assured him. But I need you to make something clear to them. If they contact me again, if they call, if they show up at my work or my home, if they try to reach me through you, I will file a restraining order. I'm done playing games. Jake promised to deliver the message, and apparently he did, because I haven't heard from Linda and David since. Update 2. I never thought I'd be writing another update to this post, but something happened last week that changed everything, and I need to get it off my chest. Patricia died. It was sudden. A heart attack at the library where she worked. She was helping a patron find a book one moment, and the next moment she was gone. She was 67 years old, and I thought we'd have at least another decade together. Robert called me at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I knew something was wrong the moment I heard his voice. Sarah, honey, he said, and I could hear that he'd been crying. I need you to come home. Patricia's gone. I drove from Denver to Patricia and Robert's house in a fog of grief and disbelief. The house felt impossibly empty without Patricia's energy filling it. Robert looked lost, wandering from room to room as if he couldn't remember what he was supposed to be doing. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements, phone calls and casseroles from neighbours. I stayed in my old room, surrounded by the books Patricia had helped me choose over the years, and tried to process the fact that the woman who had truly raised me, was gone. The funeral was beautiful. The church was packed with Patricia's colleagues from the library, students Robert had taught over the years, neighbours who had been touched by their kindness. I gave the eulogy, talking about how Patricia had given me not just a home, but an example of what unconditional love looked like. After the service, as people were making their way to the fellowship hall for lunch, I saw them. Linda and David, standing awkwardly by the back doors of the church, dressed in black and looking uncertain. My first instinct was rage. How dare they come here? How dare they intrude on this sacred space, on my grief, on my goodbye to the woman who had been everything they never were? But before I could say anything, Robert appeared at my side. Sarah, he said quietly, those people by the door, are they? My biological parents, I said through gritted teeth. Robert nodded slowly. Do you want me to ask them to leave? I considered it. Part of me wanted to have them thrown out, to make a scene, to tell everyone in that church exactly what kind of people they were. But Patricia wouldn't have wanted that. Patricia had always taken the high road, had always chosen kindness over conflict. I'll handle it, I said. I walked over to where Linda and David were standing. Up close, they looked older, more fragile than they had 6 months ago. Linda's eyes were red, and she was clutching a tissue in her hand. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my voice low. We saw the obituary in the Denver paper, Linda said. We wanted to pay our respects. She was important to you. She was my mother, I said. The only real mother I ever had. David flinched at that, but he didn't argue. We also wanted to tell you how sorry we are, Linda continued. Not just about Patricia, but about everything. About the way we handled things, about showing up at your work, about all of it. I stared at them, trying to read their faces, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or just another manipulation. Jake told us what you said about the restraining order, David said. We understand. We won't bother you anymore. Linda stepped forward, and for a moment I thought she was going to try to hug me. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is for you, she said. It's not much, but we wanted to contribute to Patricia's memorial fund. She gave you the life we couldn't, and we're grateful to her for that. I took the envelope without opening it, unsure what to say. This wasn't the conversation I had expected to have with them, especially not here, not today. We'll go now, David said. We just wanted you to know that we're sorry for your loss, and we're sorry for ours too. Your loss? I repeated. Linda wiped her eyes with the tissue. We lost you 20 years ago, Sarah, and we're finally starting to understand that it was our fault, not yours. They turned to leave, but Linda looked back one more time. Patricia raised an incredible woman, she said. We're proud of who you became, even if we don't have the right to be. After they left, I stood in the back of the church for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The envelope in my hands contained a check for $500 made out to the Patricia Henderson Memorial Library Fund, along with a handwritten note that simply said, "Thank you for loving our daughter the way we should have." I never saw Linda and David again after that day. Jake told me later that they had gone to grief counselling together and that Patricia's death had forced them to confront the reality of what they had lost when they gave me away. I think seeing you at the funeral, seeing how devastated you were, made them realise that Patricia was your real mother, Jake said, and that they gave up the right to that relationship a long time ago. It's been 3 months since Patricia died, and I'm still learning how to live without her. Robert and I have grown closer, united in our grief and our memories of the woman who brought us together as a family. Sometimes I think about Linda and David, and I wonder if their apology at the funeral was genuine or just another performance. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. They were a chapter in my story, but they weren't the story itself. The story is Patricia teaching me that families are built on love, not obligation. The story is Robert showing me that fathers can be gentle and supportive. The story is Jake proving that siblings can choose each other even when their parents fail them. The story is that sometimes the people who give birth to you aren't your real family. And sometimes the people who choose you are the greatest gift you'll ever receive. Patricia used to say that every ending is also a beginning. Her death was an ending, but it was also the beginning of my understanding that the love she gave me doesn't die with her. It lives on in every choice I make to be kind instead of cruel, to choose love over resentment, to build bridges instead of walls. That's the story I want to tell. Not the story of abandonment and rejection, but the story of finding home in unexpected places with unexpected people who see your worth even when you can't see it yourself. Final update. I'm writing this final update from my new office. Last month, I accepted a position as an investigative reporter for the Washington Post. It's the job I've dreamed of since college, and I know Patricia would be proud. Jake helped me pack up my apartment in Denver. As we were going through boxes of old papers and photographs, he found something that stopped us both in our tracks. the manila folder from the day I was adopted, which Patricia had apparently kept all these years. Inside were copies of all the legal documents, but also something I had never seen before. A letter from Patricia to Linda and David, written shortly after my adoption was finalised. The letter was typed on Patricia's old typewriter, the one she'd used to write letters to the editor of the local newspaper for years. In it, she thanked Linda and David for trusting them with my care, but she also made something very clear. Please understand that while we will always respect your role as Sarah's biological parents, we consider her our daughter in every way that matters. We will love her, support her, and help her become the remarkable person we already see in her. We hope that someday you will want to be part of her life again, but if that day comes, it will be on her terms, not yours. Reading those words, written when I was just 12 years old, I understood something I had never fully grasped before. Patricia had been protecting me from the very beginning, not just physically and emotionally, but legally and socially as well. She had been preparing for the possibility that Linda and David might someday try to reclaim me, and she had made sure the record was clear about where my true family loyalties lay. There was also a sealed envelope with my name on it, written in Patricia's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 6 months before she died. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I hope Robert had the wisdom to include this folder in your belongings. I kept these documents not because I thought you'd need them legally, but because I thought you might need them emotionally someday. You've asked me over the years why I was so sure about adopting an older child, why we specifically requested a girl who had been given up rather than orphaned. The truth is, I was given up too. My biological parents kept my younger brother and gave me to my aunt when I was 9 years old. I know what it feels like to be unwanted by the people who created you, but I also know what it feels like to be chosen by people who see your value. My Aunt Emma raised me with fierce love and unwavering support, just as Robert and I tried to do with you. She taught me that family is not about blood, it's about choice, commitment, and unconditional love. I want you to know that adopting you was not charity or obligation. It was the greatest privilege of our lives. From the moment we met you, we knew you were meant to be our daughter. Your biological parents' inability to see your worth was their loss and our greatest gain. If Linda and David ever come back into your life, remember that you owe them nothing. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even acknowledgement. You are not responsible for healing their regrets or absolving their guilt. You are only responsible for living your life authentically and surrounding yourself with people who value you. You have grown into everything we hoped you would be and more. You are kind without being naive, strong without being hard, successful without forgetting where you came from. Robert and I could not be prouder of the woman you've become. Live boldly, love deeply, and never forget that you were wanted, chosen, and cherished every single day of your life with us. All my love always, Mom, because that's who I really am. Jake and I both cried reading that letter. Even in death, Patricia was still protecting me, still giving me exactly what I needed to hear. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, Jake said, wiping his eyes. She was, I said. She saved my life in every way a person can be saved. That evening, I called Robert to tell him about finding the letter. He cried too and told me that Patricia had spent hours writing and rewriting it, wanting to make sure she said exactly what I needed to hear. She worried about you constantly, he said. Not because she thought you couldn't handle whatever life threw at you, but because she knew how much you had already been through. She wanted to make sure you knew how loved you were, even after she was gone. The move to Washington, D.C. has been everything I hoped it would be. My editor here, James, is brilliant and demanding, and the stories I'm working on feel important in a way that makes me excited to go to work every morning. I'm covering political corruption, corporate malfeasance, and social justice issues, the kind of investigative work that can actually make a difference. I've also started dating someone. His name is Marcus, and he's a civil rights lawyer who understands the importance of chosen family. When I told him my story, he didn't try to convince me to reconcile with Linda and David or suggest that I owe them forgiveness. He just listened. And then he said, "It sounds like the Hendersons raised an incredible daughter." Jake visits me in DC every few months, and we've built the kind of sibling relationship I never thought I'd have. He's thinking about going back to school to become a social worker, specifically to help children in foster care and adoption situations. "I want to be the kind of advocate you deserved when you were 12, he told me. "I want to make sure other kids don't fall through the cracks the way you almost did." As for Linda and David, I heard through Jake that they've been going to therapy together, trying to work through their guilt and grief over losing me. Part of me hopes they find peace, not for their sake, but because carrying that kind of regret must be exhausting. But I don't think about them much anymore. They're not part of my story going forward, and that's okay. Some chapters end, and trying to rewrite them is pointless. 6 months ago, Robert started dating a woman named Helen, who works at the library where Patricia used to be head librarian. I was nervous about meeting her at first, worried that she might try to replace Patricia in our family dynamic, but Helen is wonderful, kind, intelligent, and completely understanding of the fact that Patricia will always be Robert's first love and my real mother. "I'm not trying to be Patricia," Helen told me over dinner during my last visit to Denver. "I'm just trying to be myself, and hopefully that's enough to earn a place in this family." It is enough. More than enough. Because that's what real families do. They expand to include new love without diminishing the love that came before. Last week, I was invited to speak at a conference for adoption professionals about the importance of supporting older children in the adoption process. Standing at that podium, looking out at social workers, attorneys, and prospective parents, I thought about 12-year-old me sitting in the back of the Hendersons' car, terrified and certain that I was unwanted. Every child deserves to be chosen, I told the audience. Not settled for, not tolerated, but actively chosen and celebrated. The parents who gave me biological life decided I wasn't worth keeping. But the parents who gave me real life saw value in me that I couldn't see in myself. That's the difference between people who have children and people who raise children. After my speech, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She told me she and her husband had been considering adopting an older child, but they were worried about the challenges. "Your story gives me hope," she said. "It reminds me that love really can overcome almost anything." I gave her Patricia and Robert's old number and told her to call them if she wanted to talk to parents who had successfully adopted an older child. Because that's another thing Patricia taught me. Pay it forward. Use your story to help others write better endings to theirs. As I write this final update, I'm sitting in my apartment in DC, looking out at the city lights and thinking about all the ways my life could have gone differently. If Patricia and Robert hadn't been looking for a daughter to love, if they hadn't had the patience to help me heal from abandonment, if they hadn't shown me what unconditional love looked like, I could have ended up angry, bitter, unable to trust or love or believe in my own worth. Instead, I ended up here, successful, surrounded by people who value me, doing work that matters, building a life that would make Patricia proud. The truth is, Linda and David giving me away was the best thing they ever did for me. Not because they intended it to be, but because it led me to the people who were meant to be my real family. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the best thing that could happen to you. Sometimes being unwanted by the wrong people is the first step toward being cherished by the right people. Sometimes the family that chooses you is infinitely better than the family you were born into. And sometimes the greatest act of love is recognizing that someone else can give a child what you cannot, and stepping aside to let that happen. I'm grateful every day that Linda and David made the choice they made, even if they made it for selfish reasons. I'm grateful that Patricia and Robert were looking for a daughter to love. I'm grateful for Jake, who proves that siblings can choose each other across time and distance. I'm grateful for Marcus, who loves me without trying to fix me. I'm grateful for Helen, who honors Patricia's memory while bringing her own light to our family. Most of all, I'm grateful that I survived long enough to understand the difference between being given away and being given the chance to find where I really belong. That's the real story, Not abandonment, but belonging. Not rejection, but selection by the people who mattered most. And that's the story I'm going to keep writing. One choice at a time, one relationship at a time, one act of love at a time. The end. Edit. Thank you to everyone who has reached out with their own stories of adoption, abandonment, and chosen family. Your messages mean more to me than you know. To those asking about updates on Jake, Robert, and Helen, we're all doing well. Jake finished his master's in social work last month. Robert and Helen got married in a small ceremony in Patricia's favourite garden, and I was promoted to senior investigative reporter. Life is good when you're surrounded by people who choose to love you. Edit 2. Several people have asked if I ever plan to reach out to Linda and David again. The answer is no. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed, but I don't wish them ill. I hope they found peace with their choices, just as I've found peace with mine.